Imagine watching a political figure who spent years projecting absolute confidence suddenly lose control of the narrative. Gavin Newsom, the governor who always looks camera-ready, the man who speaks like every crisis is already solved, is now scrambling behind the scenes. And it didn't happen because of a policy failure, a messy press conference, or a bad poll. It happened because a whistleblower stepped out of the shadows carrying a set of internal emails that were never meant to see daylight. And the instant those emails hit the public sphere, everything changed. These weren't routine memos or harmless staff chatter. According to early reporting, they were strategic exchanges, the kind that reveal not just political planning but the machinery behind it. Messaging coordination, off-record media shaping, quiet deals meant to steer public reactions before they even happen. Emails like that don't just raise eyebrows. They raise alarms. And that's exactly what happened inside the Democratic Party. One moment, everything seemed orderly. The next, party leaders were calling emergency strategy calls. Comms directors were rewriting talking points. And advisors were trying to piece together who leaked what, who had access, and how bad the fallout might get. Because once the public sees even a glimpse of political engineering, the trust you spent years building evaporates in seconds. For Newsom, that's especially damaging. His entire career has depended on maintaining the illusion of control, smooth delivery, clean messaging, tight discipline. And when someone whose image is built on polish suddenly looks off balance, people notice. But here's the part that really hits. The timing wasn't random. Whistleblowers don't surface during quiet weeks. Leaks like this don't emerge by accident. Someone wanted this information out. Someone wanted it released right now, right in the middle of intense behind-the-scenes positioning for higher office. So the real question isn't just what the emails show. It's why now? To understand the significance, you have to know how Newsom is perceived inside the party. He's been quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, preparing himself as the natural successor for national leadership. He's media savvy, articulate, and confident, with the kind of West Coast appeal that donors love. But that image only works when he looks flawless. Leaks, scandals, whispers of backroom maneuvering. Those things chip at the foundation he's standing on. And the people who've been waiting for a moment of vulnerability, they're already circling. Inside the party, there's been tension for months. Moderates want stability and unity. Progressives want boldness and ideological conviction. Operatives want someone electable who doesn't create unnecessary drama. Newsom has been trying to present himself as the figure who can satisfy all three. But these leaked emails challenge that image. They hint at a governor managing narratives behind the curtain while publicly telling voters everything is transparent and above board. And in an era where voters on all sides are tired of scripted talking points, that contrast is dangerous. The instant the leak happened, the responses were telling. Newsom's communications team didn't respond with the calm assurance of a group that had seen the emails before and prepared a strategy. They reacted like people caught off guard. Early statements sounded rushed. Clarifications contradicted each other. And even sympathetic journalists admitted privately that the tone was unusual for a governor known for message discipline. That alone shows how rattled the inner circle is. Because when a political staff reacts emotionally instead of strategically, it usually means they weren't expecting the blow. Meanwhile, analysts are already dissecting the content. Some emails reportedly suggest coordination with media allies to pre-shape coverage of key California policy debates. Others appear to discuss talking points with political influencers before public announcements. None of this is technically unusual in modern politics. Every major figure does some version of it, but the optics matter more than the practice. And the optics here aren't great. For years, the Democratic Party has been fighting an internal battle about authenticity. Voters want leaders who seem real, not rehearsed. Transparent, not managed. Human, not manufactured. That's why leaks like this sting. They reinforce a perception that politics has become less about serving people and more about shaping narratives. And that perception is exactly what critics, especially Elon Musk, have been hammering for months. Musk has repeatedly argued that political institutions operate in ways that hide the real decision-making from voters. Whether you agree with him or not, his platform amplifies any story that feeds that narrative. So when internal emails spill into public view, it hands ammunition to his argument on a silver platter. That's why Republicans immediately seized on the leak. They framed it as evidence of backroom manipulation, calling it proof that the governing class is out of touch with everyday Americans. It's a predictable move, but an effective one, especially when the timing overlaps with ongoing fights over government transparency. Progressives, on the other hand, are treating the leak as confirmation that establishment Democrats keep too tight a grip on messaging and aren't listening to grassroots voices. To them, the emails validate years of frustration about how narratives get shaped before movements even have a chance to speak for themselves. And for voters in the middle, independents, moderates, people who bounce between parties depending on the cycle, the leak feeds a larger skepticism. The idea that politicians say one thing on TV and do another behind the curtain. That skepticism can swing elections. Inside the Democratic Party, the effect is even more immediate. Some figures who've stayed quietly behind Newsom for months are now reassessing their positions. A few donors are waiting to see how bad the fallout gets before sending another check. And operatives are privately gaming out what the 2025 and 2026 landscape looks like if Newsom's shine starts to wear off. Because whether people admit it publicly or not, many Democrats have viewed Newsom as a future national contender, a potential presidential candidate, a figure who could rally the party in difficult moments. But strong contenders can become weakened contenders fast when leaks create doubt. And that's the current reality. Uncertainty. Uncertainty about who leaked. Uncertainty about what else they might know. Uncertainty about whether this was an isolated act or the first move in a larger effort to expose political maneuvering. And uncertainty is poison in high-stakes politics. As journalists, legal analysts, and watchdog groups continue combing through the emails, the attention only intensifies. Newsom's team is now stuck managing both the content and the narrative fallout, two separate battles, both draining, both unavoidable. The irony is that the public still doesn't know the full scope of what the email trove contains. Only portions have been released so far. Only fragments are confirmed. That means more could surface, and every insider knows it, which leaves Newsom standing in the spotlight, trying to look unbothered while privately bracing for the next blow. And right now, everyone is waiting to see who speaks next, the whistleblower, investigators, party leaders, or someone else entirely. Because if part one of this story is the leak, part two is the motive. And the motive may be even more explosive than the emails themselves. If the emails were the spark, the real explosion comes from understanding why they surfaced. Leaks in politics rarely happen because someone simply felt like it. They happen because a faction sees an opportunity or a threat. And in Gavin Newsom's case, the motive behind this leak is starting to look like a power struggle that's been brewing longer than anyone admitted publicly. Because the truth is, Newsom hasn't just been governing California. He's been quietly running a shadow presidential audition, meeting with donors, traveling internationally, appearing on national networks, and positioning himself as the polished alternative to both the aging Democratic leadership and the fractured Republican landscape. And when someone begins to rise that quickly inside a party, rivals begin to calculate. Some calculate their distance, some calculate their loyalty, and some calculate their timing. The whistleblower didn't just drop emails. They dropped them at a moment when Newsom's national stock was peaking, when his influence inside the party was expanding, and when internal divisions were widening. That's not coincidence, that's strategy. To understand the motive, you have to look at the power map inside the Democratic Party. It's not one unified machine. It's a collection of competing blocs, establishment veterans, progressive organizers, tech-aligned moderates, union leadership, and donor networks tied to different priorities. And for months, those blocs have been trying to determine who the next standard-bearer could be. Newsom was on most of their shortlists, but not all. There are influential figures, some older, some younger, some already in Washington, who see Newsom as a threat to their own political futures. They see a man with deep donor ties, high media visibility, Hollywood backing, and the kind of charisma that frightens anyone trying to secure their own place in line. And if you're trying to clear a path for yourself, the easiest way to do it isn't through a public debate. It's through a private takedown. Leaks are the scalpel of political warfare. Silent, precise, and devastating. But there's another theory emerging, one that insiders are whispering about quietly. It's the idea that the leak didn't come from a rival, but from someone closer to Newsom than anyone realized. A staffer, a former aide, someone with access and disillusionment. Because sometimes the biggest threat to a politician doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the people who've seen everything up close. If that's the case, then the motive shifts. It becomes less about strategy and more about conscience or revenge. A staff member frustrated with internal decision-making. Someone angered by decisions hidden from the public. Or someone who felt sidelined, punished, or ignored. Either way, the effect is the same. A targeted blow to Newsom's political armor. And right now, analysts are dissecting every thread to figure out which story fits the emerging pattern. The tone of the emails, the timestamps, the people included, the ones excluded. These details offer clues, and political operatives are poring over them with forensic intensity. But beyond the insider interpretation, there's a broader reality unfolding. The leak didn't just hit Newsom. It hit the Democratic Party at a moment when it can't afford another fracture. The party is struggling with messaging alignment, struggling to maintain voter trust, and struggling to present stability in a chaotic political climate. And the timing couldn't be worse. Because in the middle of this crisis, other major Democratic figures are making moves, subtle, quiet, but noticeable. Fundraisers are being reshuffled. Speaking schedules are being adjusted. High-profile endorsements once assumed to be locked down are suddenly pending. Power doesn't pause for damage control. While Newsom's team is fighting fires, others are building ladders. But here's where the story takes a deeper turn. The leaked emails reportedly reference a handful of outside figures, media contacts, donors, policy consultants, some of whom are connected to influential networks in Silicon Valley. That matters, because when the public sees political communication intertwined with tech influence, it activates a very specific fear about modern politics, that decisions aren't just being shaped by elected officials, but by private power centers operating behind the scenes. And with Elon Musk openly criticizing political media coordination for months, the optics become even more volatile. Musk has been vocal about transparency, government influence, and the manipulation of online narratives. The leaked emails, regardless of whether they confirm that or not, appear to line up with the concerns he's been broadcasting to millions. That alone shifts the public reaction. People who normally ignore political stories are suddenly paying attention. People who dislike Newsom now feel validated. People who trust Newsom are now uneasy. And people who don't trust the system at all are pointing to the leak as proof of what they've suspected for years. This is why the reaction inside Washington has been so intense. Senior Democrats are trying to figure out if this leak is a one-time embarrassment or the beginning of a larger information drop. Because leaks often come in stages. First, a small release, then a bigger one, then the bombshell. Journalists are already trying to contact the whistleblower. Congressional committees are quietly preparing letters. Watchdog groups are filing requests. Everyone is preparing for what might come next. Which raises another important question. What if this is part of a broader realignment inside the party? Several political strategists have been warning that the Democratic coalition is unstable, divided by ideology, geography, and generational change. And when a party enters a period of internal uncertainty, ambitious figures start making bold moves. Removing a frontrunner is one of the boldest. But there's also a larger context here. Outside of politics, California is dealing with economic pressure, population shifts, and criticism about governance. If Newsom's public image weakens, it doesn't just affect him. It affects how voters perceive the party's management of the most visible democratic state in the country. And that's why national figures are paying attention. If California leadership looks compromised, it becomes harder to sell the message of stability in 2025 and 2026 campaigns. Strategists know this. Donors know this. White House advisors know this. So the motive behind the leak could be less personal than it looks. It might be about control. Control of the narrative. Control of the party's future. Control of who carries the Democratic banner into the next era. And right now, it looks like someone decided Gavin Newsom shouldn't be that person. This doesn't mean Newsom is finished. Far from it. Politicians survive scandals far worse than leaked communications. But what makes this moment so dangerous is that it strikes at the heart of his political brand: competence, composure, and credibility. If those three pillars crack, everything else he's built shakes with them. And at this moment, with investigations beginning and questions multiplying, the cracks are already showing. Now the real test begins. How Newsom responds in the next few days will determine whether this becomes a bump in the road or a turning point in his career. And the next development, the one everyone is quietly anticipating, is who the whistleblower is and what else they might be holding. The moment the emails leaked, the most urgent question inside every political office wasn't what's in them. It was who dropped them. Because identifying the source isn't just about assigning blame. It's about understanding the battlefield. And right now, Gavin Newsom is surrounded by players who each have their own reasons for wanting these emails to surface. But here's the truth political insiders know all too well. The scariest whistleblower isn't the one on the outside looking in. It's the one standing close enough to know where the pressure points are. And that's exactly why the hunt for the source has become a full-blown internal crisis. Newsom's team has reportedly tightened access, restricted communication channels, and quietly started questioning staff. Not interrogations, not yet, but check-ins. The kind of polite conversations where every word is weighed and every response is measured. Because when a leak comes from inside a governor's circle, trust doesn't erode. It collapses. And that collapse is happening in real time. But while the internal scramble continues, the public story is accelerating in a different direction. Journalists are now dissecting the leaked emails line by line. Political commentators are spinning narratives on both sides, and watchdog groups are calling for investigations. Every hour brings another round of scrutiny. And the longer the identity of the whistleblower remains unknown, the louder the speculation becomes. Some believe the source is a progressive staffer disillusioned with the governor's behind-the-scenes dealings. Someone who believed the public deserved transparency. Others suspect an establishment rival who wants to step into the national spotlight and sees weakening Newsom as the fastest path. There's also the possibility of a disgruntled former aide. Someone cut out of decision-making or forced out after a disagreement. And then there's the most unsettling theory, that the leak came from someone within the donor or consultant ecosystem, not a government employee at all. Because when consultants turn on their clients, it's not ideology, it's strategy. The uncertainty alone is destabilizing. When you don't know where the strike came from, you can't predict where the next one will land. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous for Newsom. Political survival isn't about intelligence or charisma. It's about predicting threats. If you can't do that, you're flying blind. While Newsom's team works to identify the source, something else is brewing. Something even more consequential. The leaked emails are starting to intersect with larger political narratives already simmering across the country. Narratives about transparency. Narratives about influence. Narratives about the blurred line between political messaging and media coordination. These narratives don't need proof to be powerful. They grow on perception alone. And the perception right now is that Newsom's polished public persona might not match the political machinery operating behind the scenes. That disconnect is creating a credibility crisis. Not necessarily a legal crisis. Not yet, but a credibility crisis. The kind that eats away at a politician's foundation until the whole structure wobbles. Make no mistake, Newsom knows this. That's why his public statements have shifted from calm confidence to controlled defensiveness. It's subtle, but it's there, the kind of tone politicians use when they're trying to reassure the public while privately managing a firestorm. And while Newsom struggles to regain his footing, others are watching closely. There are Democrats in Washington who have been waiting for a moment like this, a moment when a major contender stumbles, creating space for someone else to rise. Some have been quietly reaching out to donors. Some have accelerated their travel plans. Some have signaled to key influencers that they're ready to step into the spotlight if the party needs them. Power vacuums don't stay empty for long. Meanwhile, conservative voices are leveraging the moment to amplify broader concerns about political transparency. They're pointing to the leaked emails as evidence of a coordinated communications ecosystem, one that shapes narratives before they reach the public. It doesn't matter whether the emails confirm that or not. What matters is that the story fits into an existing suspicion, a suspicion people across the political spectrum already feel. That's the part Newsom can't control. Once skepticism takes root, it spreads, and it's already affecting his standing. Polling firms are reportedly preparing overnight surveys. Donor groups are quietly assessing the political temperature. Even California insiders, people who've backed Newsom for years, are starting to ask whether this is the kind of crisis a rising national figure can withstand. Because when political figures hit turbulence, the first people to jump ship are the ones who care more about their own survival than theirs. And in politics, that's most people. But perhaps the most revealing development is coming from the whistleblower themselves, or at least from the clues they left behind. The structure of the leak, the timing, the way the emails were curated before being released, it all suggests someone who understands political cycles, media behavior, and internal party dynamics. This wasn't a random data dump. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't chaotic. It was tactical. Every message released so far serves a purpose. Each one paints a picture of calculated influence and strategic coordination. And the whistleblower seems to know exactly how much to reveal and when. That's the part that has insiders genuinely nervous. The possibility that the whistleblower is still holding the most damaging emails back. Political leaks often follow a pattern. First, a taste. Then the context. Then the revelation that shifts the entire landscape. If we're still in the early phases, things may get significantly worse before they get better for Newsom. And that brings us to the next phase of this story, the fallout inside the Democratic Party itself. Because the leak didn't just hit Newsom. It exposed fractures, rivalries, and insecurities that were already simmering beneath the surface. And now, those divisions are coming into full view. The moment the leak hit national headlines, the Democratic Party didn't fracture. It splintered, not in a dramatic, public meltdown, but in the quiet, private way political institutions break, with whispered calls, panicked strategy sessions, and sudden shifts in alliances. Because what's happening now isn't just a crisis for Gavin Newsom. It's a reshuffling of power inside the party. And everyone with ambition sees the opening. The first group to react was the establishment wing, governors, senior senators, longtime advisors who've spent years trying to hold the party together through internal ideological battles and external political pressure. These are people who value predictability, stability, message discipline. Newsom was supposed to be one of their most reliable assets. But the leaked emails now make him look like a risk, unpredictable, exposed, possibly compromised by internal discontent. For establishment leaders, that's unacceptable. Behind closed doors, some of them are already discussing contingency plans. Not because they want to bury Newsom, but because they can't afford to tie the party's future to someone who suddenly looks vulnerable. The second group reacting is the progressive wing, younger lawmakers, activist coalitions, and influence networks that have been pushing for a generational shift within the party. They've been skeptical of Newsom for years, viewing him as too polished, too calculated, too tied to wealthy donors and corporate interests. To them, the leak isn't a scandal. It's validation. They're using the moment to argue that the party needs authentic leaders, not manufactured national figures. And privately, some are preparing to make moves, lining up endorsements, reaching out to grassroots donors, positioning themselves as the fresh alternative. This is exactly the kind of internal shift that can reshape primaries, policy platforms, and national strategy. But the group making the most consequential moves right now is the third one, the donor class. High net worth individuals, political committees, tech executives, and industry-backed organizations that quietly steer millions into campaigns behind the scenes. They don't care about ideological narratives. They care about viability. And when viability changes, their loyalty changes with it. If they believe Newsom can weather the storm, they'll stand by him. If they sense long-term damage, they'll pivot, fast and quietly, towards someone else. Already, a handful of major donors have reportedly paused contributions, waiting to see how bad the fallout becomes. A pause might sound small, but in politics, it's a warning shot. It signals doubt, and doubt spreads. But the most telling shift is happening inside California itself. State leaders who have relied on Newsom's influence, legislators, local officials, policy advocates, are suddenly moving more cautiously. They don't want to be tethered to a scandal if the situation gets worse. So they're hedging, creating distance, acting as if nothing is wrong publicly while preparing alternative alliances privately. This is how political isolation begins, slowly, subtly, with polite silence instead of open rebellion. Meanwhile, Republicans are treating this as an opportunity to expose systemic issues within California's leadership. They're calling for transparency investigations. They're amplifying the email content. They're framing the entire leak as proof that the Democratic establishment is hiding far more than it shares. It doesn't matter whether the claims are overstated. What matters is that voters are listening. And right now, according to early internal polling leaks, confidence in Newsom's credibility is slipping, not collapsing, but slipping enough to send tremors through his inner circle. That's why the governor's public appearances have taken on a new tone, less confident, more controlled, almost cautious. It's subtle, but seasoned political observers can see the shift. When a leader talks like they're trying to manage fallout rather than shape the future, you know the pressure is getting to them. And pressure is exactly what the whistleblower intended. Because this leak was never just about emails. It was about timing, leverage, influence. It was about forcing cracks to appear in a structure that many believed was solid. Now, those cracks are widening. And every actor inside the Democratic Party is asking the same question. Is this the beginning of a correction or the beginning of a collapse? For Newsom, the challenge is now existential. He must convince his allies that he's still the strongest figure for the party's future. He must reassure donors that he remains viable. He must project confidence without appearing dismissive. And he must do all of this while preparing for the possibility that the whistleblower is holding back even more damaging material. Because if there's a second drop, if more emails surface, or if the whistleblower steps forward publicly, the crisis shifts from manageable to defining. That's where things stand now. A governor fighting to maintain his standing. A party recalibrating its power structure. A whistleblower whose next move could reshape everything. And a political landscape waiting for the next tremor. If you want, I can expand into a follow-up arc, a reaction segment, a closing commentary, or a continuation built around aftershocks.